The minority is asking for a probe, and the Speaker has actually asked the Finance Ministry with support from the Finance Committee in Parliament, with support from the Health Committee in Parliament, to probe further into this matter. So it says Oforiatta gives detailed breakdown of COVID-19 expenditure. Also, government's priority is to support growth of indigenous companies, according to the Vice President. Will take Ghana out of woes, ATI. And now let's move on to the business analyst. And it says GJA elections, June 4 to set up insurance package for journalists. No imminent fuel shortage, according to the CBOD boss. He's assuring us, even though a Bloomberg report indicated that because the Central Bank of Ghana is rationing dollars now, we're likely to face fuel shortage. And Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors has said that at the moment they have only supply that should last us about a month. NPA says we're planning to bring in some more, and so there's no cause for alarm. COVID-19 expenditure. Government spent 3.72 million Ghana cedis less, 3.72 billion Ghana cedis less in 2020 and 2021. Economy grows by 3.3% in Q1. This is according to Professor Samuel Kobna Enim, government statistician. Let's leverage on TV to abate unemployment menace. We go to the Independent. It says COVID-19 management. Probe Oforiatta's account. Speaker charges Parliament, but Minister says we've been transparent, so no fears. And also hundreds of weepers, Minister soldiers pull down properties on CSIR lands. That happened yesterday. Business and Financial Times. Fertilizer faces prolonged price hikes, according to the World Bank. Motor insurance database records over 3 million vehicles. And FBN Bank wins CSR Excellence Award. Interest rates on Momo loans to go up. And IES says fix tour now. Yesterday, the finance minister indicated that we needed some $1 billion in order to supply some more dollars onto the markets to address the issue of fuel and the high cost of fuel in the country. Well, Rains sweeps second Takrady. That's on the front page of the Daily Guide. Attorney General chastises Ablakwa. He says that withdraw that statement, apologize, or I will file a lawsuit against you, based on some revelations that Honorable Kujeto Ablakwa made with regards to the fact that the Attorney General was actually secretary to the Secretariat while he still served as Deputy Attorney General when that deal for the cathedral was being sorted out. So government blows 12 billion Ghana cedis on COVID-19, and it says bust settles debt. Let me move quickly to the Ghanaian Times. Government spent 12 billion Ghana cedis in 2020 and 2021, according to Finance Minister. Ghana, Malta to deepen ties in tourism and culture, and school children vehicles trapped in heavy rains in Takrady. Finally, the Daily Graphic says Speaker directs investigations into COVID-19 expenditure. You'll find that on page 16. Government prudent in COVID-19 expenditure, Finance Minister tells Parliament. And the big story for the Daily Graphic, 48 hours ultimatum on CSIR lands, over 100 structures pulled down. My guests are seated. As you know, every Thursday we have an all-women's panel, and yes, they are here. There's one who is in the running to become I'm just laughing anyway. She's in the running to become the women's organizer. I'm just looking at her and smiling because I know how exciting this conversation is going to be this morning. But Ellen Amadeko is here, and she has filed to be the women's organizer for the MPP. And have you been vetted? You have vetted as well. You've passed?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So now the work has officially begun. Yes. How is it going?
It's been exciting. It's been a learning process.
I'm
actually enjoying it. So
you are?
Yes.
You think that you can kick Kate's Gym 4 out?
Yes, I think so.
You believe so?
Yes.
I see. Anyway, lawyer Joyce Bar Mokhtari also joins. She's a special aide to former President John Dramani Mahama and also former Deputy Transport Minister. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing, lawyer?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
I like the way you're all giving Ellen these very free advertisements. Because,
well, I was just going to ask you about it as well.
For some weird reason, I don't even see the powers that be within her own backyard giving her so much promotions
Oh.
So you guys are doing a fantastic
We're doing a good
job.
job for her.
Yes.
Well, let's see how it goes. Really, we're not the ones who
Certainly.
decide. Anyways, the electorates
Well,
that
at
will.
least you're trying to convince others that she's
Oh, no, not
capable,
at all.
so-
We're just asking her how it's going. Now, we're hearing that you might also have some interest in running for some
No,
party
for now, absolutely.
position.
For now, no.
None at all. Not even General Secretary.
Absolutely not. It's never
So all
actually
those
crossed
rumors
my
are
mind.
lies?
No, it's never crossed my mind. No,
I
absolutely
see.
not.
Okay, well, we heard that you might be
I'm
interested
very-
in General Secretary.
No, absolutely not. I'm
I
very
see.
content.
You're content?
Absolutely. Especially
Okay.
regarding party work. I think I do enough as it is. So,
I see.
unlike Ellen, I don't want to extend my fetters too much. I'd like
Is
to
it
keep
because of the
them
pressure?
very serious.
Are
There's
you
enormous
avoiding?
pressure. It
Yeah.
requires a lot of time, and I am working at least 4 jobs. I think for now that covers.
That's enough.
Yes, that's enough. So.
But if the NDC should come to power and, you're given the mandate to become a minister or whatever, that one
Well, that's a
shouldn't
totally
be,
different conversation, I'm
so
sure.
it doesn't matter. Okay.
When we eventually kick Ellen and her people out, certainly those are conversations we might be having, but I don't think those ones require as many mentions as contesting
They
for
say they're breaking the
women's
8.
organizer. Oh, I mean, we try to do that, and so certainly it is everybody's ambition to do the unusual. The usual is what we are all used to, but under the circumstances, I think that their prospects are actually very, very dire.
Okay. Well, yesterday the finance minister was in Parliament, and this was after a few tries to get him to Parliament to answer questions on COVID-19. Remember last Thursday, he was supposed to make an appearance, and he didn't. The majority leader told us that he had asked for more time, but Speaker was very upset about that and said he was not going to allow the finance minister or entertain any business from the finance minister if he did not come to account for COVID-19 expenditure and all the other questions that had been asked by the minority. Yesterday, he was in Parliament, put out some figures as to how much we mobilized, how much was actually spent, and broke it down further with regards to how much was spent on dry foods, ensuring that kids and teachers go back to school and the like. Let's take a listen to what exactly he said. And of course, the minority also raising objections to the inconsistencies in numbers that the minister had put out as against what the president had said in his State of the Nation address back in March 2022, and why they're calling for a committee to probe further into the COVID-19 expenditure. Take a look.
Mr. Speaker, for the year 2020 and 2021, the program expenditure amounted to 15.763 million for the COVID-19 related expenditure, out of which the actual utilization was 12.036 million. In 2020, a total amount of 11.162 million, this includes a cap, was programmed for COVID-19 related expenditure. Out of this amount, a total of 8.12 billion was utilized. The amount was utilized to provide support to households, supply equipment, and provide relief to health workers, health infrastructure, security operations, evacuations, quarantine and coordination, economic relief, stabilization and revitalization, and COVID-19 complementary releases. Mr. Speaker, a total amount of 4.6 billion was programmed in the 2021 budget for COVID-19 related expenses. At the end of 2021, total utilization was 3.9 billion, representing 85% utilization.
The directive is for the Committee on Finance, supported by the Committee on Health, to investigate and inquire further into the application and utilization of all the revenues received, referred to as COVID-19 funds, and to report to the House. The timelines, because we are going on recess, and in view of the agenda of the rest of the meeting, I will want the report to be presented by the first month of our next meeting. First month of the next meeting will be in October, because by the 27th of this month, the House will be on recess. And the committee will need more than just these few weeks to do the work.
cannot sit here and say that the Minister of Finance should be the only one accounting for the COVID amount. The Speaker, the Minister responsible for Finance is only a conduit of releasing the money. But the monies were spent at the various MDAs. The monies were spent at various MDAs. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I call on you, Mr. Speaker, to set up an ad hoc committee so that we can bring the various heads of the MDAs, in particular, that spent the money, to account for this in detail. Mr. Speaker, I'm calling on you, Mr. Speaker, to use the powers under the Constitution, Article 101, to set up 103 of the Constitution, to set up an ad hoc committee to particularly get the various COVID entities that spent the money to account for it in detail.
20, when the COVID-19 outbreak occurred, we all were very scared and did not have any clue about this pandemic. It took a responsible government to devise a very deliberate plan to protect us, Mr. Speaker. All the 275 members in this chamber are alive. We all benefited one way or the other from the reliefs that have been presented to this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that our spouses were even privileged to come to the hospital or the clinic to get their jabs.
The minister concluded that all the monies we borrowed that was utilized and not sitting in any bank account ended up at about 16.4 billion. He reported in that same document that when he now adds our own money, which in this case is the money he drew down on our contingency vote or contingency fund, the total amount is 18.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't look like 12 billion. In fact, that is 50% underreported. From the minister's own document before this House, he is unable to speak to the same numbers a year after. That is very serious. Mr. Speaker, if I take the numbers the minister is reporting for 2021, that he spent 3.9, and I add it to the figure he gave me for 2020, Mr. Speaker, I get total expenditure on COVID of 22.1 billion, the minister's own report. Mr. Speaker, the minister is not reporting to us 10 billion Ghana cedis of our own money.
Why?
In his own report. This is not my report.
The minister stated the facts. The minister did not veer away from the facts. The minister has been consistent, has been transparent. And today, nobody can say that during the lockdown, we didn't serve hot meals. Nobody can say that during the lockdown, Ghanaians did not receive nose masks. Nobody can say that Parliament of Ghana was denying what it needed to protect the 275 of us.
And yes, we just saw the Deputy Majority Leader respond to concerns that were raised by minority MPs in Parliament on the inconsistencies in figures that the Finance Minister had put out as against what the President himself had said in the State of the Nation address, and even what the Finance Minister himself had said early on. Now, let's go to the President's State of the Nation address, which was given in March 2022. And there it says that in all, data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion Ghana cedis, or 4.6% of GDP, has been spent in containing the pandemic since 2020. This is what the President said in March 2022, as against what the Minister himself has told us in his statement, that we spent just about 12 billion Ghana cedis on COVID-19 out of the 18.19 billion Ghana cedis that we mobilized as well. So they're asking for a probe into this. But how is it that we're getting different figures at this point? Ellen, I'll start off with you.
Good morning. Good morning to our viewers. And good morning to all my delegates, the female delegates of the NPP party. my women organizers, my female MPs, my female MMDCs, still reminding them of our conversations and asking them to keep the faith. And
you are campaigning?
Yes, I'm campaigning.
But we're going to have to charge you for this campaign,
well,
Ellen.
You don't. It's part of the...
Carry on anyway.
Yeah, kind of say, in tree, bicycle home for swani free, so it's part of it. So I'm asking them to remember Ellen on the 16th of July. Yes, on the issue of the finance minister's report yesterday on the COVID funds. I think there's just a simple reason for why his figures might be different. That is what I think might be different from what the president said in June. We are still incurring costs on COVID. We have not finished incurring costs on COVID. The finance minister was tasked to come and give us how much we have spent up till yesterday. So if the president gave a State of the Nation's address somewhere in March, and we are in June, I expect that between March and now, we have also added more. I haven't really looked at the difference, but I believe we still added more expenses to the whole COVID fight. As we speak today, yesterday, I think I heard from the Director General of the Ghana Health Service. He was saying that we have over 1,000 people who have been infected again, and some have been hospitalized. And I assume that we are still paying for the bills for all that. So without much prejudice, I believe that the finance minister gave us an up-to-date expense on what we have done. The president spoke about 3-4 months ago. And between those 4 months, I believe we have still spent more on COVID. That for me should be some of the explanations for the disparities, because the finance minister's own seem to be a bit higher than...
No, in actual fact, so it's the other way around, because the president said we had spent 17.7 billion.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the finance minister's statement, it says that we were able to mobilize 18 billion, but then we have only spent about 12 billion of
so it
that
means
money.
there's a difference of some certain somewhere.
But how is that we're quoting lesser figures now, even if you're saying that we're even spending more because COVID has not ended?
Well,
why are we going backwards?
I think that's one of the reasons why the speaker is asking that the finance committee and the health committee should help us find out what's going on with the balance that is left, which I think is a fair statement and a fair comment, that the parliament would want to probe further into the whole thing. I heard Honorable Atuforson saying that the finance minister is a conduit from which we all get the bigger expenditure. But we should get the spending authorities to also come and show us what they did with the money. So as for me, is it the bipartisan probe that they want to have into this? I think it's fair, and they should have it, and then all of us will know exactly what goes on. But the figures between what the president said and what the finance minister said, I don't think it's much cause for worry. The money should be sitting somewhere. So if the president said we have mobilized so much money, and the finance minister is saying we haven't used all of it, where is the rest? It should be sitting somewhere. And that is where the bipartisan committee should be able to show us or find out where it is.
But is
I don't think that
problematic?
this is... I don't think so. I just think that it is a matter of figures. And it's good that they have both said what they are saying. It's easy for us to find out what's going on. I don't think it's much of a problem. Maybe the president also said that, remember he said it is mobilization. Monies we have taken from our own contingency fund, monies we got from our donor agencies, monies we got from, even from ourselves, I mean, donations and all that. So if at that time we had been able to mobilize that amount, and the finance minister says we have spent, it means there should be a balance. And I think that is what we should account for. I don't think it's much of a problem.
But even the balance, which would be about 8.14, and let me just read point 6. So it says that furthermore, during the presentation of the 2020 mid-year fiscal policy, I indicated that the supplementary request included a program funding of 19.3 billion Ghana cedis from various funding sources to support the budgets both directly and indirectly. On the expenditure side, about 11.16 billion was programmed for COVID-19 related expenses, and the difference of 8.14 billion was programmed to provide for shortfalls in revenue. And that's what a lot of people are asking questions about. When you just put out a figure and say that 8.14 billion was programmed for to provide shortfalls for revenue, why are you not breaking it further down? You've had the opportunity to come to Parliament to break down the numbers. Why do you just make such vague statements and not tell us exactly how you used it to provide the shortfalls in revenue.
Bella, as I said, he gave the money to certain agencies. It's going to be quite tough, and I'm sure we would have sat in Parliament, everybody would have sat down for hours on end if he was going to give us the direct details of exactly what the monies were used for. The monies were given to agencies. So that is why their committee is being set up. We can call all these agencies to come and account for what they were given. I don't think this is, I just think it's much ado about nothing. We haven't yet heard what the committee is going to say. They haven't started anything. So let them start. And I'm sure by the time they are done, we would all have detailed accounts of exactly what the monies were used for. I think it is unfair on the finance minister to ask him to come and give us detailed accounts of exactly what the monies were used for. We're going to sit in Parliament for 6-7 hours if we are going to hear all that, everything that 12 million Ghana cedis was used for. So the monies were given to government agencies. It was given to MMDCs. It was MMDAs.
Yeah.
It was given to ministries. It was given to people we know. We can find them. We know where they are. They should come and account for the money.
So do you then agree with the majority leader saying that it was really unnecessary to have the finance minister even come and give an account of how much was spent? Because even Parliament received some funding for COVID expenditure. They did not forward those details to the finance minister to come and report. And yet we're asking the finance minister to even come and give an account.
Well, to say that it is unnecessary, I think it is a bit... he has to come. He's a finance minister.
But if he can't give us the details, then those agencies should have come.
He has to come. Well, Parliament wanted to hear from him. The Speaker wanted, or all of us wanted an account on what was supposed to be, what we have used our monies for. So for him to come and report to us, it is excellent. I think it is a step in the right direction. He has come to report. He has come to say what he used the monies for or who he gave the monies to. It is now time for the others to also account, which I think is the best way to go. But to say that he shouldn't have come at all, the Parliament has a right to call on any minister to come and account on any issue. So there was nothing wrong with him asking him to come. I'm sure the majority leader was saying this in relation to all the issues that came up when he couldn't show up last week and all the spin that was put on it. But I think he has come. He has given his statements as it is. It is up to the rest of us to go into it, look at it, get the departments and the agencies that got the money to also come and account.
Lord Bauer, I mean, is the minority being a bit too difficult with regards to the responses that the finance minister has given? Because they have raised objections, and every time they raise these objections, the majority will come in and rebut and say that, but he has given us the figures. So what is even the point in calling for a further probe? The Auditor General has to do his, report as well. And so let's wait. Instead of asking for a probe, let's wait for the Auditor General to also do his report, bring it to Parliament, and then we can peruse that. Instead of asking for a bipartisan probe, asking for the committees to investigate further what the finance minister has put out. What do you say?
Well, a very good morning to you, Bella, and good morning to Amma and everybody else. Hello. And I'm sure that this conversation has actually been going on for quite some time. But Bella, sometimes I think we need to put our conversations in proper context. And I ask a question, that you should imagine that we were actually living in maybe about 5.5 years ago, and that John Mahama was president, and Honorable Septekwe was finance minister, and that we had this conversation demanding accountability and transparency from government's own ombudsman regarding how much had been received, how much has been expended, and how funds that were received from both statutory and, of course, international agencies was expended in terms of our COVID preparedness and amelioration. And you can just imagine that the same members of Parliament standing either on the left or right side of the aisle would certainly not be acting or asking the questions as they did yesterday. I think that the overly partisan approach to how we do business in our country has actually been the reason why we have actually reduced every conversation to what pertains in politics rather than what the reality should be. I mean, we were honestly all expecting that there will clearly be a certain breakdown, an attempt even to show, accountability, especially for how we used what was received. Indeed, he may have given some very good figures in terms of what was received, because these are all matters that are already now in the public domain anyway. It's not as if you can come out then and say that the EU did not give you this amount, or that the IMF didn't give you this amount, or that the World Bank didn't give you this amount. Indeed, there were even some new additions to the conversation regarding how much the African Development Bank gave them, which was in the regions of about 69.3 million US dollars. They also received some additional monies from other agencies that we didn't actually know about before. And yes, these were all brought to the fore and duly presented to Parliament. Naturally, questions will be asked. Indeed, there were questions about why we were not even going to establish a bipartisan committee of Parliament to go into COVID expenditure. I'm sure you remember matters to do with the conversations regarding the health minister's appearance before a committee of Parliament. You remember frontiers and how they were even procured in terms of taking the tests and vaccines at our airport, even how that company folded up. Nobody knows what happened, what actually preceded even that conversation. And so sometimes I think that we literally reduce the conversation to a certain political debate, maybe because we want to create a certain murky environment so that people would get lost in the debate. But we also know that various sums of monies were received from different quarters. For example, the World Bank gave us 430 million US dollars. We took 250 million from the Stability Fund. The EU alone gave us about $99.7 million. The Bank of Ghana gave us $10 billion, or cedis, Ghana cedis, I might say. Yeah. We took some money from the ESLA. So there were monies that moved around from all over. And I am sure that when you look at the figure 12 billion expended on activities relating to COVID, where not one medical facility was constructed, where we also know that nothing in terms of oxygen tanks, defibrillators, or any of these new procurements were done. And then you hear members of Parliament talking about distributing hot food. I mean, it just tells you that we need to elevate our debates.
How
that
so?
We need to get a little bit more serious. But you remember the controversy surrounding the sharing of this food? That in some cases even it was raw food. You remember members of Parliament, even in Greater Accra, who complained largely about the quantities, about the content, about even the cost. There was a huge hullabaloo about how much money they claim to have spent on the hot meals. And you know, when we try very hard to build a certain type of sympathy, where what we need is pragmatism and a certain practicality to the conversation. I mean, so for example, I listened to the Honorable Finance Minister speak largely to the fuller figures. There really were no clear breakdowns on what was done. I asked myself, if out of this 12 billion, even 1/4 of it had been taken and literally given to each patient who tested positive for COVID, and then the rest utilized for all the other things that government itself decided to do. We were here on your platform when we had a conversation about the Ghana Water Company still being owed for water that was extended to households. So from this table, I hope that the Finance Minister would take steps to sort out those debts. We know that some amounts are also still outstanding to the Electricity Corporation of Ghana in terms of whatever electricity or power was given to households. So we are waiting for that as well. We also know that some doctors are still waiting for the allowances that were promised for them agreeing to work in the course of COVID. You know, I just think that...
But even allowances, I mean, it says that all requests were reconciled and paid, as per the statement that the minister said yesterday.
But that's the point I'm making. Where is the evidence? And everybody is quiet. So I tend to agree with the minority that we ought to call for that bipartisan committee in accordance with the Constitution of 1992 to be established. I expect that we'll then be able to go into the nitty-gritty. Indeed, the Auditor General has come out with not just his 2020 report, but 2021, and I think parts of 2022. And in all of those reports, I don't think that he provided any concrete evidence regarding what was expended on COVID or on the pandemic, for example.
So should we not be patient?
I think that, well,
for him to conduct his study on that?
But that will be way into 2023. You know, judging by the level of corruption stories, the level of scandals that are coming up, the issues that are currently in the public domain, I'm sure if you wait another few months or years down the line, there will be so many other things that will probably come in and crowd out this conversation. And I think that in all fairness, it took the frustration of Parliament to force the Finance Minister to finally come before the House to present the report. I believe it is also because he had become almost like there was some horse trading going on. They, as finance, need to come to Parliament with some requests, but of course the Speaker made it very obvious that until this accountable thing was done, that there will be no way that any other conversations would be entertained from the Finance Ministry. So you see, sometimes when you know that you are obliged, look, there is an obligation of erga omnes placed on key actors in government to not only provide answers, but to show to the general public who elected them that they are available and willing to show accountability, to be transparent in their dealings with how state funds in particular are utilized. Remember that most of these monies that were received considering the exigency of the circumstances. It did not mean then that we were supposed to apply those monies anyhow. Look, in countries such as the United Kingdom, the ratings or approval ratings for the Prime Minister are at an all-time low. Reason being regarding his conduct, not in terms of how monies were expended, not in terms of how hospital facilities were abandoned, but because of how in the course of lockdown, they were able to relax in number 10 Downing Street and literally appear to have been enjoying themselves on the back of the challenges that they were facing in the course of the pandemic. Where standards are high, people raise the bar. People demand answers, and they demand that answers be provided effectively and within time, because time is always of the essence when it comes to these conversations. And look, in a situation where government is literally mobbed with malfeasance, we must respond very quickly and timelessly to these matters when they are raised. The challenge we have is that, look, are you not totally surprised that when we used to have a president, a vice president, an information minister, people who were running all over to respond to just about every little issue that was raised in the public domain, even in opposition, lectures upon lectures were held, traffic queues were held, radio stations were totally inundated with a vice president who could hardly keep his mouth shut. And suddenly, when you even demand answers to questions in the House of Parliament, you find that they are challenged with providing responses.
Is it about being challenged? Because we're told that usually the reason why, and especially for the finance minister, he needed more information on the questions that were being asked. 16 questions is not something that you can just wake up one day and go to Parliament to respond to. You need to contact the various ministries and everybody to give you the details of expenditure so you can come and answer these questions. Isn't that better than rushing to Parliament?
I really wish that sometimes we would go back and play the tapes of our most recent past. All the political gimmickry. And you remember, and may his soul rest in peace, I just wish that Mr. Pakwesi Mitha's Atta were here to witness. He was asked to provide answers to 172 questions and why they were going to be better managers of the public purse, why they'll be better managers of the economy, why they'll be more accountable and transparent. And I think over the years, they have failed abysmally in whatever promises they made to the good people of Ghana. And I think that we should be demanding more questions, demanding quicker action, demanding that the same voices that are currently key actors who ought to be responding even in real time have suddenly lost their tongues. I sometimes wonder what really has changed. The radio station no longer work. Indeed, they even have added on more radio stations. They have a full mouthpiece now, and many others. The same social media portals have not changed as far as I'm concerned. So why don't we suddenly have the president or the vice president and all these actors running around providing us with responses?
Okay.
Bella, you would recall also that there are also these discrepancies regards to what figures the president mentioned in the recent State of the Nation address as against what the finance minister has provided. So for all the time that he required to prepare for a mere 16 questions, a finance minister who in the past had his credentials flashed and washed in our faces, and so much hope reposed in his capacity to deliver. What has changed? That he can take all of this while to respond to just what? 16 questions.
Okay.
You understand? Look, I
Please
think that we should put government to strict proof.
Okay.
Let's demand of them what they demanded of their predecessors. Let's require of them more transparency, better responsibility. Above all, let's expect that they would actually work also in accordance with the tenets of the Constitution.
All right.
You know, wishing these things away and trying very hard to create some wishy-washy impressions out there and even acting as if they have some better reasons to act as they do. I think it is not right in the eyes of well-meaning Ghanaians.
All right. I'll come to Helen shortly. We'll just take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get into the nitty-gritties of what the finance minister said yesterday in terms of the support to households, how much was spent to provide free water and electricity to citizens of the country. We'll get into Agenda 111, that's 600 million Ghana cedis that we're told was given or released to begin construction across the country back in 2020, even though sod was cut in August 2021. Keep watching. This is The Big Issue. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is still The Big Issue on TV3Newday. Ellen Amadeko is an aspirant for the National Women's Organizer position for the MPP. And lawyer Joyce Ba Mukhtari is here as well. She's a special aide to former President John Dramani Mahama, former Deputy Minister of Transport. And we're perusing even further the statement that was made by the Finance Minister yesterday in responding to questions about COVID-19 expenditure. Now, let's get into the details now, and we'll talk about support to households and the fact that some amount of money was said to have been given or paid for free water and free electricity. So let me get into that. It says here that as part of support to households, government through the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and its agency, Ghana Water Company Limited, provided free water, which initially lasted for the period April to September 2020. And this followed an executive directive, and of course it was extended to December 2020 for lifeline consumers. So the distribution was also carried out by the Community Water and Sanitation Agency and other smallholder water supply organizations, and an amount of 556 million Ghana cedis was budgeted in 2020 for this program, out of which 456 million Ghana cedis was utilized. So we're talking about free water, free electricity. At a time when we're told that it was free, eventually we had to pay for it. So how is this making an appearance in the statement that we provided free water and free electricity when Ghanaians have constantly cried about the turnaround decision made by government to have us pay back what was supposed to have been free, Ellen?
But Bella, I haven't yet seen my water bill. That's stated on the bill that I am paying for the COVID water. So I believe that since it was free, it is actually free indeed. But somebody else would have to pay back. Somebody would have to pay for it. It might not be you, it might not be me, but definitely Ghana as a state would have to pay back. And from the report that the finance minister has given us, it was paid for by monies from the COVID fund, or the monies we got together from the COVID fund. And so if you tell me that it is not free, as I said, I have not yet seen on my water bill that the free water that was given during the COVID time has been distributed for all of us to pay. But these monies that were given to us, these monies that we either went for, we have to pay for that in it. As much as it is free for us, the citizens, the state has to pay for it. And that is why the finance minister has come to give an account of it.
But why
some
call
of that
it
money,
free if you knew that we were going to pay back for it eventually?
The name should have been changed to, because at that time...
Should you not have been honest with Ghanaians?
The dishonesty?
Was that more of a pre-election campaign promise?
At that time that we were going through the COVID, I don't think titles and titles we gave to things was too important. The government said we are all not going to pay for water for 6 months, which we didn't pay for. And as I said, I am here to see it on my water bill, that we are going back to pay for it. But as a state, we had to pay for it. And so the monies that came to us, whether it was a grant, whether it was a loan, we had to pay the Ghana Water Company for the services they rendered to us during that time. So I don't see the dishonesty in this. At that time we were taking the water, it was free. But as a state, how then do we settle those bills? We had to keep Ghana Water Company running. That money had to be given to them. And so that money was taken from the COVID funds. I don't see where the hula baloo is coming from in this matter.
You only made that promise because it was pre-election and you needed to find a way to win votes?
I don't think it was, the 2020, 2019, 2020, and the situation we're in, I don't think anybody was too interested in making pre-election promises. We're rather interested in surviving till the elections. And government did everything that it had to do to make sure that we all survived. So whether the water was free, the electricity to Lifeline, and remember, even after all of us enjoyed it, Lifeline consumers, people who definitely were in the, the really terrible state, they were all given
50 megawatts.
Yes,
also, yes,
they were all given the service for free. Have we asked them to pay for it? No.
But are we all not paying indirectly? Because the Ghanaians have complained that even after that free session, when your water bill comes, instead of what you were paying before, now they've increased the price to a certain amount, and you're paying for water that you don't even know how you...
between 2020 and 2022, a lot of things have happened. So if you tell me that before COVID, you were paying 10 cedis, and after the COVID alleviation programs, you are paying 15 cedis, are we not paying extra for almost everything? So that doesn't mean that you are paying for the COVID
but water. In a way, that was also
in
included.
a way, we will pay for it. And how we are paying for it is through the COVID alleviation funds that governments received, whether it was grants, whether it was loans. They were all monies that were given to us. And government said, I used some of this money. I gave it to the utility companies so that they will defray their costs. Why is the dishonesty in this? At least government has come to tell us where they got the money from and what they used it for. So I don't get this whole thing about the water. Wasn't the water given to us for free?
How many people even got it? Because there are some people, even at a point when we're told that there will be water tankers in some areas given free water. There were people who were complaining that they had never seen the water tankers. They were actually buying water from people who were even getting the water for free. So a lot of people did not get it.
Before COVID, a lot of people, or some people in our country, didn't have running water before COVID. They didn't have access to the Ghana Water Company lines. It's not as if it was during COVID that people stopped having water. So, if I remember, the Ministry of Sanitation, and I do remember the then Deputy Minister, Honorable Patrick Boama, going around in certain areas where we noticed that they were having very difficult times with water. Typical area that I saw was, around Budumburam. Because I live in Kaswa, so I saw it. Where over the years, water has never really run well in that area. But during the COVID times, I remember some poly tanks being supplied. And then Ghana Water bringing in tankers to come and put in those poly tanks. And people actually went for water for free.
Of such areas
as I said, my area,
because in my area, there was no free water.
That was your area. I'm talking about my experience. You cannot tell me that the COVID alleviation funds that we all benefited in a way, we all benefited from it in different ways. When they were sharing the free food, I didn't get some. I didn't even see some in my area. But remember, the food was given to very, very people who were in very terrible conditions, people who, if they didn't go out a day, there was an issue. I remember seeing scenes on TV where Kayayis, people who were homeless, were all given these things. Are you trying to tell me that because they were given those food, somebody who was also asked to stay at home, like the rest of us stayed at home, government should have come to our houses to also come and give us those food? No. You accept what you need at a particular time. And we have very, very, how do I even put it? People in our society who were going to be so much affected by the COVID. And we saw it. So those were the people who were saved, including water and electricity. Now, if you are trying to tell me that because those people, the very poor people, received it, so everybody across board should have received the same thing, that is unfair. Somebody got sick and went to the hospital. The government took care of that person free of charge. I am yet to hear anybody who said when they went to any of the government institutions, when they were sick with COVID, they were asked to pay anything. These are all benefits and these are all money.
I can tell you for a fact that there were even some health professionals who had to pay for their own COVID treatment, even though they were actively testing for COVID-19 and got into contact with the virus. They said, and I remember that the finance minister even promised that they were going to pay some insurance to some of these health workers.
Have they?
There were some who constantly till date sent us messages and were asking that when are we going to receive our insurance?
But
some of them are saying they didn't get their 50% increase extra salary that was supposed to be given to them.
Did others receive it?
But everybody was supposed to receive. Frontline health workers. The finance minister didn't say some will receive. He said frontline health workers
defined by the Ghana Health Service. So it is the Ghana Health Service that determined who a frontline health worker was.
Anybody that was working directly in relation to COVID-19.
It will be difficult.
So if we have someone who was working in one of the testing sites,
it would have been difficult.
And he caught COVID twice, and he said on all those two occasions, he had to pay for his own treatment.
It would have been difficult for me and you to sit here and determine who a frontline health worker was. So we have to go back to the Ghana Health Service. Who did you determine were frontline workers? And those people, have they been paid or not? The person you are speaking to specifically, was he a frontline worker?
He was.
If he was he so recognized by the Ghana Health Service?
He was actively testing for COVID.
The fact that he was actively testing for COVID does not mean
that was testing for COVID. So he was a frontline health worker.
If he was a frontline worker, why wasn't he treated? This might be a one-off situation, which we must follow and find out.
He says he wasn't the only one, so it's not just a one-off.
If up till today he hasn't still received his money, and he has still not been treated, or he has still not been given back his money for treating himself, it is something he should bring up, and then we follow. But the general thing that was said, the general provisions that were made, we have 1,000 and other health workers who received it.
Did they get the insurance?
Definitely.
All of them?
That will be difficult for me to know as we sit here. If any one of them think that they deserved it and they didn't get it, they should bring it out and let us follow up for them. That does not spoil or does not take away from the fact that health workers were promised some things and it was delivered. Of course, we are going to have issues. There are going to be a few, one or two, who either their things didn't go through or they didn't receive it, like this gentleman you are talking about. I think he has to bring it out. Let us follow up on it. The fact that he or a few others didn't receive it does not mean that the others didn't also receive. They received it. Otherwise, if they hadn't received their monies, I'm sure the Ghana Health Service and all the nurses and the doctors would have been up in arms by now. I am not saying that every single one of them who deserved it got it. But if you didn't get it, you should let us all follow up because you deserve it. You are a Ghanaian, you're a health worker, you did work. So that shouldn't take away from the bigger pot of people who received everything. But to make it seem as if because one or two people are having issues with these things, so therefore the government didn't work, that is also unfair.
Okay. Let's talk about how much was also spent on ensuring that children and teachers went back to the classrooms. Remember that there was a long break in our educational system because of COVID-19. Now, when you go back to what the president had said in his State of the Nation address, he had said that it took an unbudgeted 1.9 billion Ghana cedis to ensure that our children and teaching staff went back and stayed in school safely. That's how much we spent, according to the president. If you take a look, but if you take a look at what was reported also in the statement, it says that we spent about 1.19 billion, even though the president had said 1.9 billion. So which is which? Which is another inconsistency that a lot of people had been asking about. That how do you mention this figure here and go and mention another figure here?
As I did say, the president spoke a few months ago. The finance minister has given us current state of affairs. So if there are discrepancies, this is very easy to find out. And between now and when the committee sits, I'm sure they'll be able to sort it out, iron those differences out. For me, the monies that we use to get our children back into school, I think it was well spent. Remember, government paid for all the teachers for the 9 months or so that they were home. They were all paid. No one's salary was cut, the teachers. All the government, apart from the teachers, all other government agencies, even though they didn't go to work, they were all paid. If you remember, we had an issue with the private schools who were also complaining that their schools were also down and their counterparts in the government agencies were being paid. Of course, all this will have to come from somewhere. The money will have to come from somewhere. And the money did come from the COVID account, as the finance minister has said. I don't know if there's going to be any debate over it. Are we saying that it was too much that we used, or it was just right for everybody or for the whole country?
It was lesser figures that the finance minister quoted as against what the president said. Should we not have had some reconciliation at that point? Looking at the time that the finance minister had to even come and respond to COVID-19 expenditure.
The president he mentioned those statements on projections, on what we are going to spend, on what we have spent.
No, he said what we have spent.
The finance minister is supposed to give us exactly what has been spent. It's been how many months now since the president spoke in March? I don't see why we are making too much noise about this. It is very easy to find out the differences between the two. If the president said in March that we have spent
1.9 billion.
1.9. And then the finance minister says we spent
less, 1.1. Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to be a good thing for us? It means there's a balance.
But if he says that I'm quoting these figures based on what the Ministry of Finance gave me.
Yes, and the Ministry of Finance is the one that actually gives out the monies. So if the Minister of Finance said, maybe in March we mentioned, or we gave the figures to the President that we're going to spend 1.9. We didn't spend the 1.9, we spent 1.1.
So why would you give the President those numbers
They should account to us the 8 million that is in between. And that is very simple to do. And that is why we have the Parliament is asking for an ad hoc committee to be looked into. I don't see why we want to make so much noise about this. It is very easy to find out why there's a difference between the two.
Okay.
After all, if the president says we spent 1.9 and the finance minister who actually dishes out the money said we spent 1.2, what happened to
You're not worried about the inconsistencies?
No, I'm not really worried. I'll be very worried if after the ad hoc committee sits down and they cannot give us any good reason for why that figure wasn't the same. Then I'll be worried. Okay. Between now and then, I think we should just give them some space and let them go sit down and get us the correct figures. It is very easy for them to do that.
Lawyer, did you benefit from the free water and free electricity?
Absolutely not. You know that they had a threshold, and so it wasn't actually available to everybody. And I'm not sure what criteria was used. You know, I think that it's scandalizing to hear Ellen, a government spokesperson, speak in the manner that she's currently doing, for persons who never hitherto even sat here to debate about whether we eat roots or not. I'm surprised that such discrepancies in terms of figures, and huge figures at that. Look, the next biggest scandal, if we are allowed to go into this matter in terms of COVID expenditure, will be what we did with COVID funds, as we received. Humongous sums of money spent on the whims and caprices of government's ombudsman, beautifully supervised by Vice President Baumia, as now head of that infamous failure of an economic management team. And you know, we need to have very hard conversations. So imagine that the finance minister appears in Parliament after generating so much anger. The august house did not even receive even an apology for the delay. You see, there is a lot of undercurrents that we don't pay attention to. There's a litany of excuses, a raft of excuses, very obvious excuses that you don't even expect kids to make. And people who were touted as being the very best to manage our economy make these excuses and expect us to allow them to go scot-free. I mean, if any individual even took some of these matters to court, for example, I'm sure even the court will demand that we probe how these resources were expended. Look, this is a government that received enormous resources. And you know, I say it each time, thank God But Ghanaians did not fall in droves, dying by the minute or by the second. You and I all witnessed what happened in China. We saw what happened in the United States of America. We saw what happened in the United Kingdom. In Africa, for some weird reason, God, knowing the sorts of wicked leaders that we have, tried very hard to find solace for us by helping us. Many people died, yes. Some very close to us and close family members. But we also know that in many ways, it could also have been worse. And why should we even be commending the finance minister for appearing late, for making no bones about it? What sort of examples are our leaders setting? When I studied leadership in 2008 in the United States of America, we were told that there's nothing wrong with leaders showing even a little bit of humility. It is why we put so much emphasis on accountability, because it is only then that you find leaders coming with a certain modicum of humility. And of course, surprisingly, even yesterday, there really were no Bible verses or quotations, largely because I'm sure in the main, all the verses have now been exposed, even in terms of the monies wasted now on the cathedral. You know, look, COVID and all the expenses were yet another smokescreen to steal from citizens. And I say this without any fear of equivocation. There's a reason why the finance minister didn't want to be probed. And look, he wasn't asked 16 questions. There was a pile-up. There were arrears of questions that had stayed unanswered for a very long time. He chose to put them all together and come at his own convenience to present whatever he deemed fit to the House and when he did it and how he did it. You know, I listened to Amai talking about water, about this, about that. Look, inflation is at an all-time high, of the highest in 8 years.
18. In
18 years.
Yeah.
The hardship on the good people of Ghana, especially our poor, the social protection that used to be available, we don't even know what is happening to it now. You know, things such as water, little as it sounds, electricity, tanks for people to go and fetch for free. Please, I think we belittle the debate sometimes. Let's raise the bar. Let's demand fairness and equity. Let's demand that the economy be better managed. Let's demand that even for the finance minister to admit how much his company data bank has been paid over the years as transaction advisors. Are they the only transaction advisors in the world? Are they the only company providing financial services in Ghana? You know, Bella, I think that we have fallen short of the glory of God. Let's show some humility. Let's accept that we have failed. Let's accept that we have actually led everybody into a ditch. And all this grandstanding undermines the very purpose for which we elect leaders. And it is wrong that we are creating this impression that leadership is just because you can shout very loudly and that people will elect you anyway. And then you come into office, perform very poorly, and then you refuse even to admit that you have failed. You know, for all the lectures that we listened to, for all the debates that we had, I think we expected something more than what we are receiving.
Okay.
And I look forward to us avoiding these overly partisan conversations. COVID and how the funds were wasted and expended by the powers that be is one of the biggest scandals in the history of this country. And for even less scandals, other countries have taken some action. You heard about what happened in South Africa, for example. We heard about what happened in Malawi, for example. What are we waiting for?
But Coco, if you can just give me a minute, just one more question. So I remember that earlier when you were talking about the fact that there was no infrastructure, but we all know that there was some money that was expended on Agenda 111, some 600 million Ghana cedis. And the finance minister did mention it,
Bella,
that we released some 600 million Ghana cedis for Agenda 111 in 2020.
Just like the cathedral, we spend those monies doing what? Pulling down structures that were existing. What happened in Lekma? We're still waiting for the construction to start. I've told you, if we cause an investigation into these huge figures being bandied about, you'll find out that like all the other monies we've heard about, these monies have gone into private coffers.
Okay, we have to go by Ellen. So we released 600 million Ghana cedis for Agenda 111 in 2020, when we actually cut sword in August 2021. How is that even possible?
Have you heard about how much was expended on designs for Agenda 111? Add that to the list of things.
Well, we're told that we'll have to even redesign some of them.
Ghana, and I have seen the progress that's some of these hospitals have taken, and I believe that it is money well spent, and it is going to be money well spent. As for the critique of the finance minister and of everything that happened with COVID, I'm not expecting any good news or any good comments to come from the MDC and therefore from Auntie Joyce. What I'll tell Ghanaians is that at least the finance minister has been there. He's given us an account of what he has done. It's high time that we also take it, break it down, and actually go to those institutions that spent the money and ask them.
Should we not have had at least one hospital up and running by now, out of Agenda 111?
Well, it depends.
In the beginning, I remember the president said we're going to use 18 months. Then he came back and said it was an overly ambitious.
It depends on who is building and the situation. To have a hospital up and running within a year, I think it's a bit. I agree with the president. It's a bit ambitious, but the work is made that promise. But the work is going on. I have been all over the country. I've seen 2 or 3 hospitals that are up and going, almost finished.
Should one not even be running? That's the question.
Bella, as I said, it is part of the process. 110 hospitals.
You have less than 2 years to end your tenure under President Akufo-Addo. Do we even trust that we'll have at least one of them running by 2024? The important thing is that by 2024, all the 101 should be running. All of them?
That's the most important thing.
Don't worry. So the president told us only about 88 of them were even under construction. We were still waiting for the rest. Because we had to look for different pieces of land. We had to change the design for some of them.
That are even being built. Are you trying to tell me that if they are all built and they are, as I have seen, they are all going in 4 years, we can't have it.
In 2 years
we can't have it up and running.
88 hospitals can be up. Okay.
Don't worry.
We have to go.
They'll come and tell you that the president was wrong and that the finance minister has better figures.
Well,
and the
as I said, I don't
also
expect
have different figures.
All right.
I don't
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much, ladies. Ellen Ama-Deco is running for National Women's Organizer and the MPP. July 16 is when the votes will be cast. Let's wait and see how it goes. All the best. And also lawyer Joyce Ba Muktari. She's smiling at me. Am I still campaigning? Lawyer Joyce Ba Muktari is a special aide. Special aide to former President John Dramani Mahama, and also she is a former deputy minister for transport. Quick one, I dash you 1,000 Ghana cedis only to return a few months later and ask it back because I took that money from my building fund. Am I telling us to call the gesture free? That is from Nana Yao. And well, to all of you who sent messages as well, thank you. Unfortunately, we have to go. Akosia says 14 questions isn't a joke. Even SSE, we prepare for it. Good morning to Akosia, Deputy CEO of NYA. Anyway, we'll be back with some more. This is TV3Newday. There's sports, entertainment, and more coming up. And also, it is Mr. Kojo Chumbafo's birthday. He's 53 years today. Happy birthday, fellow Akora. God bless you.
Happy birthday to him, but he owes me, so he should.
Why is Johnny hating on this Akora business?
Oh, it's big news.
Mr. Chum,
Kojo is very proud.
there's a party, right?
Very proud.
We'll be back. We'll be back with more. Thank you.